Mike Amesbury.
Question number 2, Mr. Speaker.
The Minister for the Cabinet Office and Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Minister David Lidington.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I shall take question 2 and question 7 together. The inquiry has now completed its preliminary hearings and plans to start formal public hearings at the end of April 2019. Between now and then, the inquiry will hold public meetings in 18 places throughout the United Kingdom to enable people who have been affected or infected to express their views to the inquiry team. The inquiry has appointed 1,289 core participants, of whom 1,272 are people either infected or affected by contaminated blood.
Mike Amesbury.
What steps will the Minister take to repair the damaged relationship with those infected, whose confidence in the government has been undermined by the fiasco of the entitlement to legal aid and now the failure of the Cabinet Office to swiftly notify departments not to destroy relevant files?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as so far as legal aid is concerned, more than £250,000 has been provided to those affected by this scandal to help them pay for their legal representation. As regards the other matter that the honourable gentleman mentioned, this was an honest mistake caused by an administrative error. We explained in full in the form of a written statement to the House and apologised for the inquiry as soon as that discovered. And all departments other than the Legal Aid Agency and the Courts and Tribunal Service have now confirmed that no relevant records were destroyed during the relevant period.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, the chair of the inquiry, Sir Brian Lancaster, said that many victims of the infected blood scandal are still living on the breadline today. Now, the inquiry is not due to look at financial support until 2020. So what more now can the government do to help the people affected?
Well, as the honourable gentleman knows, there have been different compensation packages that have been agreed by the Department of Health in the different parts of the United Kingdom. Sir Brian did ask the government to look at the case for some additional measures. Those are being considered by the Secretary of State for Health and his ministerial team, and my honourable friend, the Minister for Mental Health, is very willing to talk to the inquiry team about this.
What do you think?
Sir Oliver Heald.
The very comprehensive nature of this inquiry is important, and it is also important that it should have a time frame which is kept to. Is my right honourable friend able to give us any idea as to whether the timetable is still robust and when we could expect to see a final report?
As my right honourable and learned friend will know, it is a matter for the independent chair of the inquiry to determine its duration. But in my conversations with Sir Brian, he's always been very clear to me that he does not want this inquiry to drag out. He wants to get justice and a clear outcome for the people who are survivors and victims, and he'll be striving to secure that objective.
Antoinette Sandback.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A number of my constituents are affected by this scandal and have waited for decades for answers as to how it was allowed to happen. Will my right honourable friend ensure that members of this House are updated as to where those meetings outside London are held so that we can keep our constituents informed and get the maximum participation?
Mr. Speaker, I do have a list. Rather than read it out now, perhaps I could write to my honourable friend and place a copy in the library of the House so all members know where those meetings will be taking place.
Anna Johnson.
I suggest to the Minister that one measure he could take quite quickly is to actually level up all the payments that those infected and affected receive because of the variation around the United Kingdom at the moment because of devolution, and that would go a long way to showing good faith to this community.
Minister.
The honourable lady has always been the most ardent champion of those who are have been affected by this scandal, but I do have to say to her that it is the legal and constitutional position that each part of the United Kingdom is responsible for its own compensation scheme, which reflects the devolution settlements as regards health policy.
Tom Pursglove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could he say a little bit more about the role that those who've been affected by this tragedy will have in setting the terms and the scope of the inquiry. I particularly raise this because of the issue of access to treatments, which is an issue that I've regularly raised and that I think should be explored.
Minister.
That particular issue is certainly one that I know Sir Brian and the inquiry team want to examine and call evidence over. People who have been directly affected have had opportunities at the preliminary hearings to express their view. More than 1,200 of them have now been appointed as core participants, and the forthcoming public meetings will give them a further chance to make sure their views are indeed heard. Sir Brian is determined that that will be the case.